All right, and we're back, and it's COMP3025. It's the winter 2016 semester, week 1, lesson 1, part 3 of our broadcast. And so, I mean, we've covered some of this already. We kind of did a little bit of an Xcode project in here. We talked a little bit of model view controller, but we're going to talk about it more because you kind of need to know model view controller for this one. So the first app we're going to build officially, again, it's right from the book, is this simple iOS application. So we're going to make another application. We've kind of come up with a demo. We're going to make a simple application, and what we're going to do is we're going to share it up on GitHub. All right, so that's what I want to try and do with that. So, so let's start off with this one. Things to note is, so we move over to this slide right here. We talked about mimicry and how it's good. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to open up Xcode. And again, I'm just using the PowerPoints as just as a guide to get through. And there's quite a few of them, but we're going to skip through some of them, right? We're going to go back to Xcode, and we're going to close this particular one down. So stop your if you got your Hello World running from last time when we did this one, just stop this. That's your kind of your first app that you made. So officially, you know, you've entered the world of iOS. You've actually made your first app. You haven't sold it on the App Store, but it's a Hello World app. There you go. All right. And we're going to shut this down and kind of let's just go from the beginning. So we're gonna kind of quit Xcode, right? Instead of like stop the project, we're gonna quit Xcode altogether, and we're gonna go back and relaunch it just to show you just from the beginning if we're gonna start again, right? I want you guys to see this a couple times, right? So that's why I'm getting you guys to stop and relaunch. Okay, so I'll wait till you guys are ready for me to relaunch. Yes.
Quit the simulator as well?
Quit the simulator. Yeah, you have to quit the simulator, quit everything, and just relaunch. All right.
Wait, so
Quit everything and relaunch.
including the VM?
No. Please don't quit your VM. That would be bad, right? Because that just means you have to. It would just redo your VM, and that would be, you know, a bad thing. Please don't do that. Okay, so we're back in Xcode here, and I want to start off with a new project, and we're going to call this one the quiz project, right? Because this is the one we're going to do. We're going to do a simple quiz. It's going to be a single view application just like before, right? So again, this is the template we're choosing. And there's different templates like we talked about, right? And again, it says use core data, include unit tests, and include UI tests. Those are all unchecked, and they should remain unchecked, right? And let's make the product name, which is going to be called quiz. Now, it should have retained your organization identifier, so com.Georgian College. It's Swift and iPhone, and click Next. It's going to ask you where you want to put it, and I'm going to put this quiz, in my Xcode projects on my desktop, which I normally have. And then press Create.
By default, the VM, the source control is checked. Should we leave it checked?
Leave it checked. Yeah. In fact, let's take care of that source control problem right now. So I want to add this thing to source control for myself, right? It's going to be called the quiz, right? So I'm going to go up on, like we always do, we go up on GitHub first, right? Let's go up on GitHub. And I have a Georgian College GitHub organization that I'm going to be using, right? And I'm going to click on this new repository, right? And then from here, I'm going to create this file. I'm going to call it COMP3025 quiz, because that's our first quiz. We'll make a quiz app that we're making. So I'll make a quiz app. So people don't think it's a quiz that I'm making, right? It's not a quiz that you're doing.
Are you finding we should do the same?
It might be a good practice for you, yeah. Right? I'm going to click Create Repository here. And notice how we have our GitHub, we have our URI here. Just check this, click this one to copy to clipboard like we normally do. And then when we go back to Xcode, you may see something different than me, but on the top, on the menu, you see that there's a source control option on the menu. Now, if you don't have it checked already, you have to click Create Working Copy. If you've seen it checked already, if I create working copy, it's going to ask me what to create. I want to create my quiz project as my working copy. Let me go back and do that again. So again, source control. If it looks like this, like mine does, because I didn't have source control checked, create working copy, right? If you have it checked, you'll see something else. I click create. If I go back to source control now, right, I have to go to quiz master up here on the top and then click configure quiz, right? In configure quiz, I want to go to remotes and I want to click the plus button on the bottom left-hand corner. And it's going to be add remote. Can I get one of you guys to grab the door? Sorry. They're just a little bit too enthusiastic for my liking this morning. Okay. Notice how my remote name is origin, and I'm going to right click and paste the URI that I got from GitHub right in here. And then I'm going to click add remote. Okay, cool. Now that I've done that, my remote has been configured and I can click done. But remember, even though I've done that, I've configured my remote and I've created my repository, I haven't done a commit yet. So in order for me to do a commit, just like last time, this is an empty project for now. Let's go into my view controller.swift, right? And I'm going to get rid of this this comment right here in my view controller.swift and kill my did receive memory warning. I'm going to kill that again like we did last time, right? And just put in here a comment, kind of initial commit. We'll call it a initial commit comment that we're going to put in there to show that we made some changes, right? And I'll save. Now in source control, I've made some changes, right? So I can go into click commit. If I click commit here, right? If I click commit, it should show me any changes that I made. If I click on the actual file, take a look at what it does. It's actually quite cool. If on the left-hand side here, if I click on my view controller that I changed, it shows me what I had before. Here's the stuff that I had, and here's what I'm going to. So it shows me that I kind of killed this one, and I destroyed this, and I got this. And I get, of course, name my commit, which I'm going to call initial commit, right?
We have to name that apparently every time.
You should, yes.
No, of course it's.
Well, you have to. Yeah, of course it would, right? Because each commit is a snapshot of the current state of your development environment, right? Your files, right? So I make a snapshot of my commit, and then I'm going to push it to my remote. You have an option on the bottom left-hand corner to push to remote automatically. I don't recommend you do that. I want you to push to remote when you want to, not all the time, not every single time. But you could check it on. Some people like pushing to remote automatically. And if you click this and you click commit, it'll push to remote too. Let's do it in 2 steps. So let's leave this unchecked for now in the bottom left-hand corner and click commit one file. So my commit is done, and notice how it's completely taken care of. If I go up on the top and I want to push, I can click push. Right? So I'm pushing to my remote now. And it's going to ask me which remote, my origin master, and I'm going to click push. So it's going to go up there and it's going to ask me to log in if you haven't done this before, right? And for you, you'd have to log into your GitHub account. So here's my account name. And I'm going to press OK. And when I do that, it's going to go up to Git, as long as you don't fail too many times, Sam, right? And then it's going to push everything out to GitHub. And if I go back here, you can see here's my GitHub repository. If I refresh, this is what we should have. Notice that it gets the quiz Xcode project and these 2 pieces here, these 2 files, right? So now we're on Git. So if you wanted to follow what I'm doing on the quiz app, I'll be putting it up on Git just like this. Let's make one more change. Let's add a print statement like we did last time, and let's see what it does now. So if I go back to my project, and here in my view controller.swift, under where it says initial commit, I'll kill this comment, and I'll just put in print, and notice it gives me the code hinting. I'll print that the view did load. So I'll say that the view, did load, or some other kind of message, right? And I'll save that. And once I save it, guess what you get on your project files on the left, right? Notice how you get this M, right? The M basically indicates that it's been modified, right? So that's kind of cool. It indicates if you have to make a commit. I don't have to commit my changes right now, but there's a good indicator, just like it would be in Visual Studio, like a visual indicator, or even in when you're using something like Eclipse, Android Studio. They all do kind of the same thing when it comes to to indicate that there's a commit that you need to make, right? So I want to make another commit. So I've modified my view did load. So let's make one more commit here, right? So I'm going to go back to source control, I'm going to go to commit. And notice if I click on my view controller, it's going to show me my changes, right? Again, this is really, really important and cool. And then I'm going to say updated view controller, right? And then click commit one file. And in a separate step, after it's done that, I'm going to go to source control, push. I'm of the school that I like to do 2 separate steps. I'm going to trust. I like doing 2 separate steps when it comes to version control. Everyone is different, and the reason for that is because I want to control what's locally on my repository, on my computer, and what's kind of pushed out to the cloud. Right? That's just me. You may be of the mind that who cares? I'm going to commit and push everything a single time. It's really up to you. I'm not going to get onto you about this stuff. The one thing I will ask is every assignment that we do, you're going to have a Git component to your assignment. There'll be a push it out to Git every single time. Yep.
I'm just keep saying that the local repositories have date.
Does it?
Yeah.
Anyone else getting that? It's just you, man. It's just you, Blaine. I don't know. I have to look at that in a second, right? It's just you, man. But that's really weird that it says that local repository is out of date. It's a fresh repository. If you follow what I did, we didn't do anything differently, right? So, so as I was saying, in your assignments, every assignment's going to have a Git component to it, where you go up on GitHub and push to GitHub, right? Because I want to be able to look at your code. Because I won't be able to get your code pretty much in any other way. You'll be uploading it to Blackboard, right? But I want to see you push it up to GitHub for a couple of reasons. One, I can download it from there much easier. It's much easier for me to get, and it's good practice for you to use version control anyway. It's got to be part of your workflow. I always want you to think, hey, if you go to a class and there's no GitHub and there's no version control, you should kind of sit there and go, so where's my version control? It's a requirement nowadays from a developer perspective, right? We all do use version control. How about the guys who went and did co-op? Did you guys use version control in co-op?
Yeah.
Who didn't use version control in co-op, right?
The government doesn't use version.
That's terrible.
I'm just kidding. I didn't actually go to the government.
No, you didn't go for the government? No. All right, fine. But if your employer isn't using version control, right? That's something that you can manage upwards, right? You can say, hey man, I really think we should use version control here because if you're paying me to code and something breaks, my computer breaks, I make a mistake, whatever, it's in trouble. I'm in trouble, yeah.
The way they did it, I think they had like different environments, and then they would save older copies of those environments. So they didn't use Git, but it was kind of a more old-fashioned.
That's old school, man.
Oh, very old.
Yeah, that's old school. We don't do that anymore. That's the old way. That's like me making copies of my project over and over again, right, and renaming it. That's what I used to do way back in the day, like 10 years ago, right? The version control wasn't as mature as it is now on the cloud, right? And so I'd have to sit there and go, okay, let's make my my project, give it another name, like project version 2, version 3, version 4. What happens if my computer dies, right? It's bad, right? What happens if I lose my USB, right? That's bad too, right? So and it happened to me many times. It happened to me lots of times, and I couldn't check to see what changes I made. I couldn't sit there and go, what broke my code? I couldn't tell. I don't know what changes I made, right? Especially if it was like, I made my change yesterday, everything was working, I didn't check that one piece of functionality, everything seemed to work, I left for the day, I came back, and now I checked that functionality and it doesn't work, and I'm like, damn, what did I do yesterday to break my code? I don't know. I have to go through it. If I don't have version control, it's a lot longer process. Okay, so cool, so we've done that. So now you know how to do version control. What about a pull, right? We can do pulls too, right? So let's go up on GitHub for 1 second and just make a README file. And I'm going to go in here and just accept the default README file that's here, and just click by putting in some, going to my edit file, and just enter, just enter something in here. So just go COMP3025,
So where's it? Oh, everything is.
and then it's the quiz app for lesson 1 at Georgian College, something like that. Right? And then let's see what it looks like to do. We're going to commit the file. Good. So now I got an extra file, my README file, up online, and I want to pull it back down in Xcode. What do? So I go to Xcode, I go to source control, and I'm going to do a pull request, right? Here's my pull request. Okay, it's going to go to master and pull, and then
Commit or
it
discard
says
changes.
pull request, right?
I could commit my changes first, right?
Yes, if you have any changes that you made, yeah. Hey, how come my README file doesn't appear in my project? That's the one thing you're going to ask, right?
Local replies to read a date.
Oh, you got it? You got that?
Yeah.
That's weird. It must be the freeze that they put on it. I want to test this out with you now. Now's the time to do it, right?
Oh, you have to refresh status.
Try it.
Where do you see that?
Here, refresh status. On the top, on source control. But that's not going to, what kind of error are you getting? Are you getting an error? Anyone else can, I know you had the error, Blaine, but anyone else have that error? What are you getting, Sam?
Local replies to read a date.
Okay. And what did you do differently?
I'm doing it. I mean, I went into GitHub out of the README.
Yeah.
I made 2 changes. What changes? Oh, you know what? That's why I gotta save it first.
All right, save it, save
Yeah,
it.
save it.
There you go. Okay, so we've done basic stuff with Git. And for your project, it's going to be required that you use Git with your partner, right? So when your partner and you get together and do your project, right? Each partner, I want to have equal kind of status from you and your partner when you kind of create your project.
Oh, it's because of the external drive.
There you go.
It's complaining about the external drive.
Okay, let's continue. So, anyone not clear on Git?
Well, did we just figure out how to add a README as well?
Oh, it's not there. It's actually on the if you go to your operating system for a second, let me just go to my desktop. One sec.
Oh, it'll just show up in the file somewhere?
Yes. If I go to my Xcode projects and if I look at my quiz, right here's my README file right here. Right. Notice how my operating system looks a lot different than what I see in my project, right? So there's my quiz and there's my app delegate, but I don't see everything. It doesn't appear the same way, like I said. And look, you see this blue folder here in my operating system, assets, X assets. I see that, but no yellow folders. The yellow folders that we normally see, they're just, again, metadata that we use inside of Xcode.
If we had created the README inside of the quiz folder on Git, would it show up?
That's a good question, right? Let's modify it. Let's try and modify that by hand. You can use any editor you want for that one. I'm going to use brackets to do it for me, right? Because I have brackets here, and so do you. And I'm just going to change my README file and say, I'll put in modified here and just save it, see what happens. So I've modified my README file in my operating system. When I go back to Xcode, I don't see an error or a message that tells me I have to do something, right? And of course, because I don't see a message, if I was to try and do, if I go to source control and do a commit, nothing's changed, right, on the operating system. So it doesn't pick it up as a required file inside my project. So then, yeah, it wouldn't be pushed to it. I did pull it though, so I wonder if I was to make a change and then push it, would it go with the push? Figure it out, Sam?
I pulled it first.
So let's get rid of, in this particular commit, let's get rid of my view did load altogether. So I'm gonna get rid of my view did load, get rid of it. I'm just emptying out my view controller, right?
I did the pull first.
Okay, that's weird. If I go to source control now and commit, I'll say I removed view did load from view controller. Yeah, and then notice how it says I'm committing 2 files. Well, I only see 1 file here, right? But somehow it's seen other files, and I wonder if, yeah, here it is. If you click the second folder, there's a project view, and then there's the file view, right? It does pick up that the README file has changed, and it picks up what's been changed in the README file. But it's just not. It doesn't pick it up inside your project. It picks it up when you know you've modified something outside the project. Anything that's in that folder, yeah.
So do you have to modify something else in order to commit both?
No, well, I would think so. Yeah, because it wouldn't pick up anything that's changed. So I'm going to commit. I'm going to make 2 commits, and then from there, I'm going to push to my remote. Okay, cool. So again, we've gone through basic Git control here, and the reason for that is, again, it's going to be required in all of your assignments. Hint, hint. I'm going to ask you a question about Git and version control on your quiz next week, right? And it's going to be something like this. You know, where do I set up my Git or my version control within Xcode? Something like that. Is it, you know, this menu, this place, that place? Where is it, right? And I'm probably going to say, is it under the source control menu under, you know, your quiz master configure quiz is probably the answer, right? That's where you do it, right? And quiz is the name of their project, so whatever your project name is, configure quiz, right? It has some other cool features. You're right, buddy.
This thing.
It's trying to kill you, Sam. Okay, if I click history for Git, notice how I have all my commits here, right? From the original commit that was created by when I created the folder to my initial commit, and then all the other commits that I've made. So this is under history. So if you go to source control history, that's where you get all that. Okay, guys, I know I'm going slow, but this is all required. This is all required stuff that I get for you for when we talk about your own assignments. You'll have to next week when you get your assignment. I'm going to ask you to version control within Xcode, and you need to know, right? So this is required. Okay, let's get back into this. So we started off a project, and we've started off that from the very first go. We've named it properly. We've done all this piece. We've talked about this kind of stuff before. And one of the things in the PowerPoints or in the book, it mentions the pieces of your application. For example, this is where all the navigators are, and this is where all the utility or inspectors are on your application. In the middle is where your editor is. That's how Xcode is broken out, right? Okay, I'm not going to keep going because we throughout this whole thing. Model view controller. I mean, you guys have had some model view controller stuff before, and I think it deserves another mention here. And I'm glad they mentioned it in their first application because Apple and iOS, they use it religiously as a design pattern, right? So, and you're going to see it across all iOS or even Mac OS X kind of design patterns when you create apps for OS X, right? So, you guys had some MVC, right? What other MVC stuff did you get from MVC patterns? You guys did it with Rich, right? When you did that MVC stuff a little bit, yeah? Right?
Is it really
Yeah,
that
we
wrong?
just touched on it when we did Web API for
Okay.
a day. Like, we didn't do a lot.
So we really got to talk about it again because then, and I'm going to ask about this because, again, this will be probably something that I quiz you on, but the model layer, again, holds the data that doesn't know anything about the user interface, like it says here, but it basically connects with your data, right? So it either holds the data or connects to, as a schema for the data. If you're using core data with iOS, a model is what we use. The view layer is, of course, all the text labels, the buttons, all that stuff that when we create our view, when we created that label that we send out to our view inside of our storyboard, that is really where it's connected to our view layer. And then there's the separate controller layer, typically in regular MVC, right? The controller layer actually is the logic behind the view and how it connects to the model, right? Well, here, if you notice, we have a view controller. So we have a view and a controller, right? And the view controller is a type of controller that is logic for the view. That's why it's called a view controller, right? So they still do that separation of concerns, but it's just the way their naming convention is in Xcode. Here's a nice little picture, and I like this picture that they give for MVC. You have your user input, and it's kind of hard to see here. If I was to maximize this, unfortunately, it might kill my recording, but I can make it like this. So here's your user input. So your user interacts with the view object, and then sends a message to the controller, and the controller passes that message along to the model. It does a round trip and comes back and kind of re-renders your view based on user input, right? So really that's what it's about. And separation of concerns, each of these layers, and I was just talking about this with the web class yesterday. We were talking about progressive enhancement, right, and the web. It's the same concept, progressive enhancement on the web, where you have 3 separate layers: your structure layer, your presentation layer, and your behavior layer, right, on the website. Well, here you have the same kind of idea. Your view layer, which is kind of the ability for us to get what's rendered back to you after you have input, right? Your controller, which has all the logic, and your model, which interfaces with your data, right? That's really what it's around. So that's the design pattern that Apple uses, and it's a scalable design pattern, and you can work within teams a little better when you use MVC that kind of the MVC pattern of development, right? So if I say, you know what, I want Ben and I want, let's say Rich and Jean-Claude and a couple other people to work with me. So let's say, Sam, you're all going to work on the view. And then I'm going to be working on the controller logic. Kelly, she's going to be doing the model. And you can do that, right? And if you have larger applications, now certainly if it's just an app, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's a small little app. But you can still do that. So in your team, and going forward, let's say for your project, there might be one of you that's really concerned with the view, auto layout, all that stuff. You'll see that it's a big concern just to set up your view properly so it's responsive. So it kind of, even from different orientations perspective on your iPhone, it takes a bit of work to do, right? So there might be just one person focusing on that and the other person doing the controller piece, right? So that's where it really, really helps out. Okay, let me just minimize, just kind of bring that down to earth again. So let's design this thing. We're going to do like what it says here. One of the things I like about the Big Nerd Ranch here is that it gives you kind of a design pattern to use for the application. Take a look what it gives you. It says, look, well, we need inner views, and it breaks it out into different swim lanes here, right? So you have your view swim lane, what's going to be in the view. Here's your controller, right? What's the logic behind the view? And there's the model. What's my data going to look like, right? So these are all the swim lanes. When I ask you for your application, when you build your application, I'm going to ask you for something like this. All right, I'm going to ask you to say, and I might give you a bit of a document, a template to say, okay, so in the swim lane, I want you to draw out what's going to be, what your application is going to be. Right, but it's going to be required for each of your assignments, right? And I don't think I'm going to do too much more than this. I might ask for this document as one of the things I ask you to do in your assignment. And so that way you understand what's happening. So here's an example. I've got a couple of UI buttons. That's what this is saying, right? And it tells you the action you're going to use. The action is really your event handler, right? So I've got my show next question event handler. If you're going to take it back to something like a JavaScript or a Java or a C#, right? That's what it does. So there's your UI button. Okay, so, and there's different kinds of connections you can make with your view controller, right? There's IB action, IB standing for interface builder. Okay, it comes from the, remember, because Xcode it's an evolution to make Xcode what it is today, right? Originally there was a separate entity called interface builder. Just like we have a simulator, an iOS simulator today as a separate entity, a separate program. So was interface builder in the past, right? I remember doing it like several years ago, and it was a pain in the ass because like you literally sometimes interface builder wouldn't launch, like it was like bad. So imagine you're trying to do something with Xcode, and then interface builder crashes, and you can't do anything, right? But now it's all part of Xcode. So UI, when you do your UI button, right? That's like, think about that as your control, your button, and you also have another button. They're both the same object. And all you're doing is there's two instances of the same object, just like we would normally do in Windows when we have a control, a button control. We bring that button control into the view, and we kind of instantiate a new object of that class, right? Same thing with UI label and so on, right? So you've got this IB action, and there's an IB outlet. There's two different things that you're going to see. An IB outlet, right? An interface builder outlet and an interface builder action. The action is actually the event handler, and the outlet, a lot of times we use that for things like how we connect or make a reference to different objects on the view. Think about it that way. So I want to affect a text box on the view or some kind of label. I need an IB outlet, right? That's what we need to do. It makes a connection, a reference, if you will. We'll talk about that as we go. If you don't understand it, and if you're like, what is he talking about? You'll see as we go what it is.
Is it similar to like the target of an action?
Correct.
So one object can target another object.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. So here's your view controller, and notice how it just says that. Your view controller is your target for your action, and inside your view controller, you're going to have these two event handlers, if you will. Show next action, next question, and show answer. Those are going to be inside your view controller, right? So your buttons are going to be targeting those two things inside your view controller. And then you're going to have in your model piece, even though we're going to write the model in the view controller, right? The model is just, again, it doesn't have to have its own separate file, right? It's just a design pattern, right? So we need the model to model our data, right? And there's going to be two strings, if you notice, right? They're two string data types in Swift. the type of because we're doing a grape, right? So one is the question, what is 7 plus 7 as an example, and then the answer would be 14, right? A quiz. So there's the question data, and then there's the answer data that's related to it. That's part of your model. So that's what we're building here in the quiz app. Okay. So I need you to understand that piece, because if we don't get into that, then you won't understand how the pieces lay out together, how they fit together. And that's why I like the book. And again, I highly recommend you guys get the book, because it's a good way. You can do it ahead of time. You don't have to wait for me to produce these PowerPoints. So all I'm doing is taking the book and condensing them so we can see them up online here. We can talk about them, right? But they're they're following the book pattern almost to the T. Okay, so it tells you what to do. It says, I want to click the main storyboard file once, and I want to drag in these pieces. So let's do that. So I want to kind of skip ahead here a little bit, right? Because we want to build the interface first. That's the first thing we always like to do with Xcode. And notice how it's nice. It asks you in the inspector selector, there's different objects here. We kind of did this already on our own when we did our first Hello World app, right? We kind of went through the Xcode stuff all together. Remember that there's the library selector that we're going to drag and drop our stuff from. So I'm on slide 28 of the PowerPoint here. If you're looking up online. Okay, so I want to drag and drop these two labels. One label that goes at the top, right, of our object. We're just going to make it a label. So it's just a label object. We're going to drag it into the view and kind of align it just right underneath in the center of our object. So let's just do that. So let's go back to Interface Builder. We're going to click on our main storyboard. Right, here's our main storyboard. Notice how I also get this this hierarchy here, right? And I want to kind of take away this panel over here, this project panel, and I can do that by just clicking this button on the top right corner of my screen. So I give myself a little bit more real estate, right? Okay, so here it is, and what I want to do here is I want to drag on the right. I want to drag from the library, from the object library. I can drag it in. Now, if you can't find it and you want to find what it is, on the bottom right, there's a little search filter that you can search for. If I type in label, right, it'll bring up the label so you don't have to swim through it to find it. So that's kind of a quick way of getting it. All right, so I can get my label and drag it into place. And again, it's just, if you notice, there's a line that's going to come up just underneath what looks like the battery line. This is my battery indicator. On my actual phone, this is almost like a little panel that appears at the top of my phone to tell me what the label of my application is right here on the top, right? And there's my battery indicator. So if I drag my label, you can see that it kind of tops out here at the top of my view, right? I want you to keep this view open. I collapsed it the last time, but this is like a hierarchy, if you will, of all the objects, the containers that contain all of your views, right? So take a look what you got here. You've got a top layout guide. That's what came up. You've got a view. That's a view container. That's what you have right here. This is this blue piece right here. And then I have my label that sits inside as a child of my view container, right? This is what it is right here. It's important to note there's a distinction between the view container and the label. Okay, cool. So I've got this label in here. Following the PowerPoint, we're going to kind of drop in the other one in the middle. So we're going to take the next label and put it in the middle of our scene, if you will. And we're also going to put a button. So let's find some buttons and put them underneath the label. All right. So there's going to be 2 labels and 2 buttons, and we're going to probably have to name these things a little bit. Okay. So let's go back into Xcode here, and I'm going to grab just my labels first. So my labels kind of go in the middle of my screen here. Notice how I get hints about where to put the label in reference to the other one. That's kind of cool, right, from a guide perspective. So I want to use my middle guide here to put this on. And I've got my label here on the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for a button. So I'm going to go down here to the filter and take the label away and go button. Just type button. And click button, this button object. Okay, so I'm going to create another instance of the button object, or one instance, and put it underneath the first label. Right, here it is. And do the same thing for the other button. Take another button instance and kind of put it underneath this label. okay? And if you notice, you go back to the PowerPoint, that's kind of what it shows here. Right? It's kind of showing that there's a label and a button and a label and a button. But nowhere in the PowerPoint, it doesn't tell you, as an example, to label the label or the button in a certain pattern right now. They're just accept the fact that you're putting these labels and buttons onto the interface, right? Like this. It'll kind of look like this. Okay. Let's move through, right? So now that we've got these two things, this is where we do the renaming, right? So we begin renaming the labels and the buttons, and we can double click on them and replace the labels with question marks. That's what they want us to do. So let's just follow the pattern. So here's my label. I'm going to double click here, and then I'm going to replace the label with question marks and do the same thing with the other label. So both my labels become question marks, right? Really, really quickly. And we want to try and replace the button text, if I'm not wrong, with next question, right? To double click, the upper button is next question, and the lower button is show answer, right? Now there's going to be some stuff we need to do in order for us to do that, right? So we'll see that in a second. So again, going back to that, it's next question on the top and show answer on the bottom. So next question, right? And then show answer. Okay, so those are our buttons. So that's what you should have right now if you look at mine. Guys, I know this is really simple, right? This is super simple, this iOS stuff that we're doing, right? Please bear with me. There's complexity in this app, believe it or not. But, and you may laugh. Okay, let's, at this point, even though we've only put a couple buttons together and whatever, let's test this app. Let's just run it in the simulator. I know it doesn't say that in the PowerPoints, but let's do it anyway to see what happens. So I'm gonna run it here, and it compiles, and if everything succeeds, you're gonna get some stuff, and it's gonna look off like this. But take a look at the buttons. I can actually click on the buttons, and there's no rollover effect or anything like that. We can set that up afterwards. But notice how if I click on the buttons, they actually do have that kind of clickable idea. It doesn't look like a button, but it really is a button.
Just get a black screen of death.
Okay. Anyone else get a black screen of death? I'll wait till you guys get it. Yeah.
Wouldn't rollover affect only like you did for last time when you're doing
Right.
testing it out here? Like you would
Right.
stay touch, right?
Right. That's what I was going to say. You're perfectly correct. There is no rollover effect because it can't detect that your finger's over it. However, there are phones now, right, that can detect where your finger is, right? So that's happening soon. I think Apple's going to have that where you can actually, when you hover your finger over an IUI element, that it's going to detect because it can do that from a dimness perspective. It can do. There's all kinds of other weird ways it can do it. They do it in Android already. Android has that capability. Some phones, right? So if you hover your finger over a button, you get a rollover effect, which is kind of weird, right? We never had that before, right? So
They call it AirView or something.
is that what it is? AirView?
Yeah. Like I can read emails without you touching the screen. I just hover my finger over it.
That's right. That's right. But Apple doesn't have that. That's an Android thing, right? So Apple has Force Touch. It's a different thing where you can do a long touch and you can actually press into the phone to get especially for your iPhone 6 Plus. That's what it does. Okay, cool. So did you guys all get it running?
It's just loading.
I'm waiting because I want to check out what it does for you because I want to see. Hopefully, you should get what I get, which is your questions and your labels to the right, right?
Yeah,
That's what
it's
you
still
should see.
loading on my screen. Next time.
Okay, so.
Okay, I'll wait till this thing comes up. Rich, is it up for you? Is it up to the right for you as well?
Yeah. But I can't move one of my labels. It's stuck in the header.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's weird. Yeah, it's because of our layout. You'll see.
It shows up though when I can click the button.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so most of you should have it running by now, I think. Where you have it running. How about if I want to stop the app? Like normally, we want some control, right? So if we press Command Shift H should make you go away. So if I go Command Shift H on my Mac, it kind of minimizes that. It kind of sends the application to the background, right? Command Shift H. Right?
Home button.
Yeah. You can also do it with hardware.
The apps that have, just click, press Command H, it'll cancel that.
If you notice on the hardware piece, right?
The Apple phone.
If you go home, that also does it. See home? Hardware home will also do it. If you don't know the shortcut key for Shift Command H or Command Shift H, it's right
Oh,
here.
it crashed.
Hardware home. Did it crash really?
Oh, you know what? It could be because we got rid of those functions we needed. No, it was the last time.
No.
it worked.
No. Okay, and if you want to relaunch it, you just click on the quiz, right? Click onto the app and relaunch it, just like you normally would press onto it on the iPhone, right? So Command Shift H puts the app to the background. It does not kill your app. How do you kill your app in iOS? Does anyone remember?
Command Shift H, swipe up.
Right? If you do hardware, if I do hardware home, it takes it home. And if I want to simulate a touch, right? Typically on the real device, I would hold down the device. If I would hold this down long enough, you get the shaky stuff going on. Take a look. So this is where I can actually delete my app. I can actually delete my app. So if I want to delete my first app that I made, I can delete that. I can delete my COMP3025. I can delete that. And I can delete my demo app that I made, right? And then if I want to click on it again, I click the home app, which is Command Shift H to get out again, right? Yeah. Only in the simulator. Remember, you're sending your files to the simulator, but the files in your machine. If I want to delete quiz, this is the one we're working on right now, right? So I hold it down just like I normally would on an iOS device, right? It shakes. The shaking says that, hey, you're going to delete something. You're in jeopardy, right? And if I click the X button, it deletes my app. Right? Command Shift B, Command Shift H. Now, if I delete my app that I'm running, it'll shut down the simulator too, right? And notice it'll give me a bit of an error. It'll say, look, I got my kill signal in my app delegate. It fired. And my debugger comes on and says there's a problem, right? So let me just stop my debugger. And I'm going to go back to my main storyboard here. And let's run it one more time in my simulator to see if it comes back, right? So if I run it again, the build succeeded, and it'll run back my simulator. And if I press Command Shift H again, then it's back, right? So my quiz doesn't disappear. I don't kill my files locally. It just kills, I can just control my simulator and what goes on my simulator. When you get your actual physical device, for people who don't know how to use an Apple device, you're going to get a physical device. It'll be the same process. Okay, let's stop this now and go back and continue the PowerPoint real quickly. I'm taking it slow because not because I don't want you to finish your the app, but because I want you to know some of these other things. So this is how we did it. Okay, and it says like what it says here. It's no longer neatly centered when we run it. And notice that our current scheme pop-up menu is right here, right in our Xcode. So if I was to run it in something else, if my device, instead of an iPhone 6s Plus, if I had a different theme, I could choose a different scheme to run it in. And if I connect my device, my iPhone device here, it'll actually pop up here on the top, right? So right now we don't have any connected devices, but this is where you see where all your connected devices are, right? So let's check. I'm going to choose my iPhone 6s instead of the 6s Plus. If you've got the 6s Plus, it's a wider device. Let's just choose the iPhone 6s. And let's see what it does now. So we run the 6s as opposed to 6s Plus. And let's see if it still runs in your simulator. Does it even run in your simulator is what I'm asking. I'm going to quit my simulator for a second and just run it. So here we go. So it's launching another simulator. The other one I was running was the iPhone 6s Plus, and now I'm running it on the iPhone 6s, and I got to do the same window here where I scale down to 33%, right? So this is, let me go a little bit higher than that. I'm going to scale to 50% now. There we go. All right, so again, you see that it's a little bit different than what it was on the 6s Plus. But Apple doesn't want you to do that. Apple doesn't want you to sit there and go, well, if I have a 6s Plus, I got to make a new storyboard, right? That would be, silly. So we can actually add constraints and use auto layout here. And this is what we're going to do the next piece. So if you follow the PowerPoint, and there's also some other things. If you want to run your simulator, you can press Command and R to kind of build and run. That's your shortcut key, right? So if I go back to my simulator here, or my Xcode, and I stop running my simulator, so I'm stopping my simulator, and I want to build and run, I can press Command and R, and then it'll build my application, right? Command and R. Okay. So again, we've learned two shortcut commands. Hint, hint. I'm going to ask you these things on the quiz next week. How do you run? How do you build? What's the shortcut for the build? Command Command R, right, for building. And how do I choose the hardware? Command, the hardware key, the middle key on the actual device. It's Command Shift H, which will click almost like that little middle button here, right? The home button, which is this button right here, right? I told you. Wow, I'm glad that you do. So otherwise, you're in maybe your iPhone came from an alternate universe or something. All right, let us continue with this little journey into iOS. All right, cool. So we want to use auto layout, and what auto layout does is you want to be able to support all screen sizes. That's the idea. So if I ask you a question about auto layout next week, what's auto layout for? It's Apple's methodology to support all screen sizes. Okay, because they don't know what kind of device they're going to come up with in the future. They don't know if it's going to be a smaller device, a bigger device, a different kind of device. Like the watch or the something else, some kind of locket, or who knows? Maybe they're going to come up with Apple glasses, tomorrow or something, right? So that's what their auto layout's all about, right? So what you want to do in the auto layout is notice how to begin doing it, specifying auto layout constraints. You want to select the top label by clicking on it, right? As an example. Again, either on the canvas or in the document outline, the hierarchy, so one of the two. And at the bottom of the canvas, there's a bunch of auto layout buttons, and you want to click the button that looks like this, like the layout button right here, this button right here. Let's do that. So if I'm going to go back to Xcode, and if I go to my the top label, and again, I've got my top label here and my bottom label down here, I can select it first. Notice on the bottom there's these layout buttons. Here's a line. That's what the align menu is. So the align menu comes up, right? And notice how I can make different selections here. So if I say, well, I want to align this horizontally in my container. So if I choose this one, right? I want to align horizontally, right? Once I've done this horizontal alignment, I can click Add One Constraint. If I click Add One Constraint down here, right? What it does is it gives me this red line. Red lines are bad. Whenever you get a red line, you know something's wrong, right? You never want to have red on your auto constraint or auto layout, right? So where do you get your layouts and your constraints? Because there's going to be something that's on here for your constraint. Now, if I click on my buttons, you click on the constraints themselves. Notice that in the view hierarchy, right, you have a section that says constraints, and there's this constraint that I have right here, and it tells you where the constraint is and what's the priority and so on. It gives you kind of a content-sensitive information about the constraint on the right-hand side. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. So again, we've loaded this in, right? And then with the align menu, it says there's an align menu that comes up, right? It says check the horizontally in container checkbox to center the label in the container. That's what we just did, right? And then we click the Add One Constraint button, okay? So it's centered in horizontally in the middle. That's what we did for the top label, right? Okay, now we need to add more constraints to center the lower label and the buttons, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to select the views, right? So that when I say views, that means the view instance of the view objects inside the hierarchy, right? So let's try that out. And then we're going to hit the pin indicator down here on the bottom. There's a different icon that's on the bottom of the pin. So let's go back. And we're going to hit the 4 views. So all these 4 views. So here's all the views. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've selected them all, right? And now we're going to hit the pin indicator down here on the bottom. This is pin. And notice how this comes up, right? This is our hierarchy that comes up. So another little menu comes up. right? Okay. So that's step 2. And what we want to click is, it says on the figure above, click on the red vertical dash segment near the top of the menu. And that's right here. So I know if you follow along, it seems simple, but right here, there's this little area. So there's the middle, this center area here, and there's this little top dashed line right here. Click onto that, like this, right? That's what you want to be clicking, right? And that's you're going to ask for constraints in a second. So once we do that, the red vertical dashed line, right? It becomes solid red, and that's indicating that you've clicked onto it, because you can click on any one of those constraints that they flow from those 4 views that we've kind of clicked on all at the same time, right? And what we want to do in the align box, we want to select horizontal centers from the pop-up menu, right? So let's do that. So there's a pop-up menu, and then for update frames, make sure that it says that you have all the items of the new constraints selected, and then click on add 7 constraints, like on the bottom. All right. So let's do that. So again, I'm going to click this whole thing again. Click the top, right, and then we're going to click align on the align menu, right? As an example, horizontal centers is what we're going to choose down here, like this, right? And then once we've done horizontal centers, we're going to click add 7 constraints.
I only have 3.
Yeah, you see?
Where's the horizontal centers button?
Constraints.
Oh.
There we go.
Hey, see this orange stuff right here?
7,000 constraints.
Yeah.
Orange is bad, right? You don't want orange or red. Orange and red, that's bad, right? If I was going to try and launch my app right now, right, just like the way it is, red the way it is, if I press Command R, right? Well, I'm running it already. Let's see what it does, just the way it is. I'm going to attach this up, and notice how right away I get kind of centering from my screen, right? That's what you should get. You should get this kind of centering right here. Do you?
I got a red, yeah. I don't have an orange line.
The orange lines, that's kind of tells you where they are, right? So if I click on one of these things, you can see that these orange constraints are here. Blue lines are good. Orange lines, what they mean, it's a warning. And notice if I click on the warnings up here on the top right corner, it can tell you that the frame for the show answer will be different at runtime. It tells you that there might be an issue. And this is the key pain point for iOS development right here, fellas and ladies. Yes?
I was going to say, is there a way to keep your instance of iPhone running while you develop? That way it doesn't have to start up anew every single time?
If you have an actual, are you talking about the instance of your app?
Yeah, like the instance of the iPhone, because you're pulling one up, and every time you restart it, it's shutting it down and pulling up a new one. It takes a while to load.
Yeah, well, the best way to do it, to be honest with you, is with a live device. That's what you would really do, right? The simulator is really there for you to kind of lay things out, and then you really should check it out on a live device, right? That's reality, right? Okay, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've added our 7 constraints, and what happens if you make mistakes? And I kind of put this in as mistakes, right? So if you get red or orange lines, it says you want to kind of fix it, and the way to fix it is you choose this triangle icon, and you want to resolve auto layout issues. That's what you do actually. So here's your orange icon right here, or there's little triangle icon on the bottom, and you want to resolve or update constraints. So you can clear the constraints here as an example. If you want to, if I update frames or update constraints, if I choose one of those two, let's see what happens. Say you update constraints, I get this blue line. This is good. If I update constraints, blue is good. Red, orange, that's bad. Yeah.
I think red was good.
No, red is bad.
Are these constraints kind of like,
So what we're doing now?
keeping it like relative, so you're like, it's like an anchor point almost?
Correct.
In the center,
Yes.
So no matter how
So-
big the screen is.
That's correct. So what you're using is so the constraint method. What it does is it says, hey, I want this much space between me and the other object, right? Me and the top of my screen. Me, one object is view and the other view, right? That's what it's doing for constraints. And the constraint model is I'll be honest with you, the biggest pain point. Like I said, yeah.
What constraint are we adding now?
I didn't add a constraint. I went to the little triangle, and I actually chose update constraints.
Update constraints.
Yep.
Mine didn't do anything.
And it may not. If you make mistakes, follow the if you made mistakes,
Select it.
slide, which is number 42, slide 42, right? If you make mistakes, if you made mistakes, you can try it all again, buddy, right? I got to move on. All right, so again, auto layout is really hard to master, like it says, and we're going to continue to use it as we go forward. Okay, we're going to make connections now, and we're kind of at the end. So this is your homework for you. I want you, and there's no marks around this for next time, right? But your assignment number one, well, we ran out of time, but your assignment number one is going to be handed out next week, and you're going to build a simple app like this one with a couple of inputs and outputs, right? So I want you to finish off your quiz app for next week as practice, please, right? I can't test you on it necessarily, but your assignment one is based on it, right? Yes?
I can do the constraints in.
Yes.
I like just delete them and try again?
Yes. You can delete all the constraints and start over
So
if you made a mistake.
If you actually commit the constraints to GitHub, is that
Once you commit your project, it holds all that as metadata in the back end because it's part of your view, right? Remember, there's view model view controller. That view is a separate XML file that's in the background and in metadata that keeps track of all your constraints and your properties. Okay?
Yeah, it's not getting anything. I think I missed something before the update constraints part.
too bad thing?
Yeah, so let's do one more thing. So let me do what you're doing. So I want to go here, and what you're doing is you're saying clear my constraints. So I want to clear them up. So they're gone, right? Now there's no more constraints. So let's do that whole constraint thing again, right? Just really quickly. So I chose the first one. I'm going to go to this piece here, right? The first thing I'm going to do is choose on the top one. I'm going to choose horizontal in container. I'm going to add one constraint, right? And notice where it says update frames, right? I didn't choose this update frames option right here, right? So I'm just choosing, add one constraint. That's all I'm doing. I'm not choosing anything in here. So now I get this red line, which you should all have, and then I'm going to select everything by going into my outliner. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here into the second button here, this one here, this pin. I'm going to pull it up, click on the top one, right between the center point and the top of my screen. These represent the corners of my screen right here, right? These are all my screen corners, my screen limitations, if you will, right? Then I'm going to click Align, and where it says Leading Edges, instead of Leading Edges, I'm going to choose Horizontal Centers. So what does this mean? It means take the horizontal center of each of my views and align them for that. That's why I'm going to align everything in the horizontal center of each of my views. Each view has a pivot point, if you will, right? A pivot point for each of my views. Notice I have red lines and I have everything else. And I want to add 7 constraints now. When I add my 7 constraints, I've got some orange lines, which is warning. Red is bad and won't build, right? Orange is warning, it'll build, but you might have some issues. And it'll come up with the issues if you click this warning indicator on the top right corner of your storyboard, right? It'll say, hey, you're going to have a problem with your build, right? Okay, now, if you want to resolve these things, the quick and dirty way to do it is to go down to the triangle, right? And then click Update Constraints, right?
Okay.
Now, if you can click this, the other way you can do it is reset to suggested constraints. That's the other option, if you have that available to you.
There we go.
Okay, now if you notice, now you have other constraints that build in, right? So one of the two. And if you notice now, the constraints are totally different than what they were before. So if I was going to build an app and I didn't care about orientation changes and I just wanted to lay out something absolutely, which I'm going to actually ask you to do for your first app, yeah?
Is it maybe your instance of Xcode? Because
No,
I get a blue line. I don't get a green line.
it's blue on my screen. You just can't see it on there.
Well, that's my
It's part of
question.
the projector.
Yeah.
It looks green to me from here.
It's blue. The sky's blue, all right? The sky's the color of Tom. How about that? All right, there we go. Right? All right, so it makes sense? So now that we've got this, if I run this in my simulator, I'm good to go. I know, your life is complete now. That's good. Sky's blue. But notice how I've got a problem in when I chose default constraints, right? They're not centered anymore because I've chosen suggested constraints. So if it screws up like this, what do? There's 2 ways to get rid of your constraints. You can delete them manually. So here I can delete all my constraints manually, right? I know we're going kind of overtime, guys. We're overtime by about 3 minutes right now, but bear with me. So let's say if I choose to delete them, I press the delete key, they're gone, right? And I can do it all again. I can click top run really quickly, And again, I'll show you one more last time because this is the pain point, like I said, for iOS, right? So kind of do horizontally. We get the red line. We choose everything again. And then we do what we did before. We choose this pinpoint here, choose the top, go to align, choose horizontal centers, click add 7 constraints. You still get the orange line. You go into this one, and this one I'm going to choose update constraints. And when I update constraint, everything turns blue. That's the way it should be. And when I run this thing, so I'm going to stop my simulator for a second. And if I go plus play it again, now you'll see everything nicely centered in my iPhone. Okay? So please, guys and girls, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to ask you this question. What's the biggest pain point for developers when it comes to iOS? Auto layout and constraints. That is the biggest pain point for us. And that is the biggest thing when you sit there and go, I want to break my machine, right? I want to break it. This is just, I could program this faster, with a toaster than with, with this thing. You might say that something like that to yourself. Guys, it just takes practice and patience. That's all it is. It's not difficult stuff. You just have to know what they do. Okay, let's update my GitHub really quickly so you have what I have. And if you couldn't get things done, then you can go into my source control on GitHub and grab my files to finish it off for your homework for next week. All right, so I'm going to stop my stuff going to source control here, and I'm going to go into commit. And notice how there's a bunch of stuff that got changed. These are all the things that I want to commit, and I want to click all of them because these are all the things that I want to update to GitHub. Right? I want all these changes to go through, right? And I'm going to add things like added several views to the storyboard. And I want to commit my 5 files. The repository could not be found. I love it. How can my repository not be found, you silly people?
Did you save your project?
Yeah, I'm going to do that right now.
So if those 4 things on the side aren't checked, we should check them?
Yes.
Are they checked by default when they make a change?
No.
Okay. But that's like if I have an Apple ID, Sam developer.
Here we go. Let's see if there we go.
To deploy it.
And I'll commit one file and push remotely right away. There we go. Okay, so guys, we're good to go. Thank you so much for this. This was the first day we got together. Remember, next week we have a short quiz, 5 minutes at the beginning of class. Please don't forget. And we're also going to have, you're going to get your first assignment 1, which is you building a simple app akin to what you're building here. So please practice this one so that we have some stuff to do. And I'm giving you 2 weeks because you only have access to do it here. If I find a solution for Ben and for other people that want, to take away their VM, I will provide that solution. I'm working on it, right? I'm not giving up, right? And if I can do that, bring in an extra, some kind of hard drive or something, because then I'd have to transfer it to you some way, right? So bring it in for next week if you can. Okay, guys, thank you so much and see you next week.
Thanks, Tom.